Welcome back to the channel. Today we are working on the 1701D, the 2024 edition, which is injected in translucent plastic for lighting. And here it is. This is our translucent white plastic body for the USS Enterprise. And once again, super easy to light because light will shine through it. And you can light block it except for the windows, paint the outside, and then scrape away the paint to let the windows glow. Very nice and easy to do. Now, what's not easy on this model is getting the wires from the main body of the ship up to the nacelles. And of course, those nacelles, you want them to have a wonderful blue and red glow. So lighting the nacelles is pretty much a requirement if you're going to light this kit. I really do feel if I can get the lighting done for the nacelles, if I can run the wires through this piece, this model is going to get much, much easier. I have a lot of confidence I can do all the other parts of this model, but lighting the nacelles is going to be the hardest part. Now, there's a lot of ways to do this. I'm going to start off and I'm going to show, or I'm going to experiment with kind of the easiest way, and we're going to see how that looks and see how viable it is. So to start off, taken my trusty pin vise and a 72nd gauge drill bit, and I have drilled some tiny holes to run some wires. So you can see I've run it right through the edge of that piece, through the plastic into the main body. Up here, I've done another hole. See how that looks? Just running right through the plastic. And I've done one along the back. Here's that drill bit. You see it did deform a little bit of the detail right there. Not very noticeable, but now I've got little holes to run some wires. The wire I'm going to start with is magnet wire or wire wrapping wire, 30 gauge. We're going to see how this looks. And we're going to start. We need, of course, a positive and a negative. So we're going to put one wire through the back like this. Our next wire is going to go along the front of this pylon. All right, with the wire run through the plastic, we are going to actually glue it to this outside edge. We're going to make it follow along just like that. We're going to super glue it down in place. Here's a look at the back of the pylon with the wire glued to the outside of it. And here's a look at the front of the pylon with the wire glued. Let's throw some paint on it. Let's mock it up and we'll take a look at this and see what this wiring solution does for us. For this test, we have just an LED strip, an LED pointed forward, and we've gone ahead and put some black and some silver paint on the inside to hopefully block a little bit of the light. And let's put a little bit of just a nice gray color over the ship. As you can see, I have done a little bit of clear red, a little bit of clear blue, just so it looks a little bit better. Let's go ahead and put the top of the nacelle on. All right, and let's go ahead and connect the power. Now remember, the point of this experiment is simply to experiment in running the wires. This is not the way we'll have the LEDs in the finished product. Lots of hot spots, not very even yet. But hey, it's glowing and it's lit, so we've got electricity to the nacelle. We have a lit nacelle. That's really what we wanted. And as you can see, we've done it just by running wire around the outside. Let's see if I can get to focus on the right part here. All right, there you go. So there you can see the wire glued right to the edge of that pylon. You can see it up here by my thumb. So yeah, the wire is visible. Looking at it from the top, you can see it comes out. You can see it runs along the edge. What looks like most is it looks like a little bit of flashing. If you were to look at this model and not know that's a wire, you might think there was flashing I didn't clean up. Let's look at this bottom part. Yeah, right along the edge there. It's hidden pretty well by the paint, but you can see the wire. But really, is it that different than kind of all these molded lines on the ship? It does not look bad. It looks like it's unfinished. It looks like it should have been sanded down a bit more. But I don't think it's obtrusive. I don't think this is too bad at all. So pros and cons. The pros of doing this way, first, it's easy. You know, it's a pin vise. It's about 4 holes. Super glue the wire to the outside. It was quick. It was easy. So I'd say this is definitely an easy method. Another pro is it does preserve all of these molded in lines and detail. If that's something you're looking to save, some people sand it off right away. But yeah, you know, you don't lose any of these raised lines. You don't lose any of the panels doing this method. And it's easier than having to dig a trench through here. Now the cons. The first con is when you get up close to it, you really can see that wire. You can see there's something on the outside there. But you know, how bad is it? You know, really we have to zoom in this much for you to see it. Once we have a paint job with the different colored panels on this ship, that really won't be too noticeable, but definitely a con that's noticeable. Another con is magnet wire is a tough wire to work with. It's easy to nick. It's easy to cut. It would be easy for something to go wrong. And when you're dealing with a tiny wire like that, it's hard to fix. I could see a situation where, you know, you're trying to do some masking and a tool gets too close and cuts this, and that would be a very difficult thing to fix neatly once this model's closed up. So I think a delicate wire around the outside here, that is definitely a con. The wire being visible is a con. One other con is this gets you 2 wires. So a positive and negative. You will do, if you do it this way, there'll be no blinking, there'll be no strobes, there's no circuits available. It's simply on, off, just either lit or non-lit, which that's how I do my models anyways. But if you're somebody who wants to run multiple wires so that maybe you could light these up in sequence or just light up part of it or do a flashing strobe, you would not be able to do it with this method. Now we're going to move on to the second method of running wires through these nacelles. And I hope I'm not going to regret this, because right now I do have a viable working way to light these nacelles that I can live with. And with the steps I'm about to take, there's not really an easy way to come back from what I'm about to do. But yeah, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to take off my nacelle. I'm going to undo the wires that I have running along the front of the pylons, because I do have some photo etch. This is made by Paragraphics. I bought these at Cult TV Man Hobby Shop, and these will let you carve some trenches in these nacelles and cover it up with this photo etch cover. So I'm going to take a little bit of time here. I'm going to try and carve some trenches here in our pylon, and we'll look at this other method. All right, progress is being made. We are digging out a nice little trench for our wires, and I started just with a scribing tool to get a kind of a deep line, and I've used a few other implements, and I kid you not, what I'm using to finish it up is literally just a screwdriver. It's about the right depth for what I want, and I am just kind of running it through the trench, just keeping it nice and square, and just digging it deeper. It may not be the prescribed tool for this, but it really is working well. I like it because it's letting me keep it very uniform and the right width as I do it. And I have a lot of control over it. So I'm getting my channel dug out pretty well. I didn't really want to use a Dremel because I was worried I wouldn't have as much control as I would want. And I was worried that the high speeds of a Dremel might melt the plastic. And this is working pretty well for me. I'm going to sand off the raised edges over on this side of the tape. The tape is to kind of make sure I don't sand off any of the raised detail on the other side. And doing it this way is going to let me use some thicker gauge wire, so I don't have to worry about that delicate magnet wire anymore. And you can, of course, make this a lot wider to do 3 strands of wire, 4 strands of wire. You can see there's plenty of room. And just have to make sure I go deep enough that the wires will be flush. And I'm pretty close. Next, I'm going to sand this down. The recessed lines are fine. It's the raised lines right here. I want to sand those down so the photo etch will lay nice and flat against this surface. So I'm going to just wet it down a little bit. And use some wet dry sandpaper to just kind of smooth it all off. Our wires are glued in place now. I'm going to go ahead and glue in the photo etch piece. Now, since this is still an experiment, I'm not going to use super glue yet, so hopefully it'll stay on through the rest of this experiment. Now, you may have noticed there's one more feature on this photo etch. You can see there is kind of this lead right here and one lead here. That's because you can actually use the photo etch as a third wire. You can use it as a ground. So while you can make a pretty large trench, if you want one more little wire or connection, they say you can use the photo etch. Now, I'm not quite brave enough to use that as a wire in my build here. I'm just going to use the two I'm running under it. But it is something you can do. So I'm going to glue this in place. We'll throw some paint on it, and we'll look at the results. All right, here we are. We have sprayed everything with a gray once again. Let's go ahead and light it up. All right, so there we go. We have run wires to our nacelles a second time, and we have power. And this time around, much nicer, clean edge around the back. A little bit of sanding still needs to be done where I had that wire, but that looks good. Looks good from the top, much, much better. And let's get a good look here. This is the photo etch side. This is the kit part. Pretty good. I think the photo etch really matches pretty well. I don't feel like I lost any detail. Now remember, I have not glued this down with super glue. So you can see right here, the photo etch has lifted up a little bit here. And it lifted up here because it's kind of being pushed down by the nacelle. I'll have to make a bigger hole up in the nacelle to accommodate the thickness of that photo etch. That could also be what's pushing it up here. This is much more how I expect the photo etch to be. Once I do super glue it down, I think it'll look like that. Hopefully I'll be able to fix it right here. And it looks like it has separated a little more in front. Once again, you can kind of see it's separated a bit where it's being pushed down from the nacelle. And hopefully once I do super glue, it'll be held a little bit closer to the pylon. But overall, I think this is very successful. I think the photo etch is doing its job. So pros for using the photo etch. First, much cleaner around the edges. Secondly, you get to do larger gauge wires. You can run 2, 3, you could probably do 4 wires underneath that photo etch, which would let you do different lighting effects. Your wires are protected. That's going to be a big one for me. I did not really like having the magnet wire on the outside edge where it could run into trouble. So protected wires is a big one. Just like the other method, you don't lose any detail around the top. Cons. Well, the cons would be, it's a very final solution. Once you start digging that trench, you're committed. Modifying the kit part by cutting it down so much is always risky. You never want to go too far or cut it too much or slip and scrape off some detail you don't want to. So altering the kit, that is kind of a risky thing. The other con is now I have photo etch here, which may change your paint options. You probably have to do a different primer. You don't want that paint to come off that brass part. So you'll just have to be a lot more careful as you paint it and mask it. And another con is, you know, unless you really glue it down well, you'll be able to see it's a separate piece. And you wouldn't want your finished model to have a piece sticking up like this. Overall, right now, I'm going to let myself be really excited about building this model because this was the part I was worried about. Running the wires from the base to the nacelles has always been the thing that has scared me away from this kit. And now that I've kind of experimented with and have 2 different ways to do it, I'm a lot more excited. This is something I can work with. Lighting these nacelles, we can do it. And neither of these methods is expensive. So if you've been looking at like expensive 3D printed parts for this, I wouldn't worry about it. If you want to go really inexpensive and really easy, run the wires around the outside. The photo etch part, once again, Cult TV Man Hobby Shop, I think it was about $20. Then shipping does bring it up. So if you have to get more than one thing, include this with something else. But yeah, I think it was definitely under 30 with tax and shipping, and I paid for fast shipping. So a little bit more expensive, but on a kit like this, a $20 photo etch piece is not cost prohibitive, especially when it tackles the tricky part of lighting the nacelles. So now that I know I can light the nacelles, I'm back to being excited about building the 1701D, adding it to my collection. And I'm going to do several more videos about building this kit. But hopefully this has shown you guys that even if you've never done it before, you will be able to run those wires from the body to the nacelle to light this ship the way it deserves. Once again, guys, thanks for following the channel. Thanks for following this build. I'll be back with quite a few updates about it, and I'll see you then.